Okay, let me tell you about this absolute nightmare I went through. It all started with my parents' house. I'm Olivia Davis, by the way. This house, it wasn't just wood and plaster. It was basically the backdrop to my entire childhood, tucked away in this really nice, quiet suburban neighborhood. I mean, everything happened there. Birthday parties that ended with cake smeared everywhere. Summer barbecues where the smell of charcoal lingered for days, just hanging out in the backyard under the stars, feeling safe. After my folks passed away, the house came to me, their only kid. I was hoping it would be that same kind of safe haven for me and my little boy, Noah, who's 6. Honestly, keeping it up was a big deal for me. I poured pretty much all my free time and whatever savings I had into it. New paint here, fixing a leaky faucet there. I wanted it to be perfect, just like when Mom and Dad were around. It felt like the best way to honor them, you know? Keeping their home the way they loved it, making sure it was a great place for Noah to grow up, making his own memories. So, fast forward to after we'd just gotten back from a week at the beach. We were tired, sandy, ready to just crash at home. But as I pulled into the driveway, something was way off. The whole street, usually so peaceful you could hear a pin drop, was buzzing. Like, literally buzzing with noise. Heavy machinery was roaring somewhere nearby, and there were construction workers everywhere, decked out in those bright neon vests, going back and forth between the community clubhouse across the street and my property line. There was even a massive dump truck parked halfway in the road, practically blocking my driveway. What in the world is going on? I mumbled, grabbing our suitcases. I quickly unlocked the front door, dropped the bags inside. Noah, bless his heart, was already exhausted from the drive and immediately beelined for the TV to watch cartoons. Good, let him relax. Me? I had to figure out what this chaos was all about. The noise definitely seemed to be coming from my backyard. I slid open the patio door, stepped out, and just froze. My backyard, the one I'd worked so hard on, the one that was Noah's playground, was a complete disaster zone. A whole section of the wooden fence, my fence, that separated my yard from the clubhouse property, gone. Just ripped out. There were huge concrete slabs dumped on my lawn, wooden stakes with bright orange flags hammered into the ground, marking off areas deep inside my yard. And where Noah's swing set used to be, just piles of gravel and construction gear. What is this? I whispered, stepping further onto the patio. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This couldn't be happening. It felt surreal, like a bad dream. Then I saw him. A guy in a hard hat, holding a clipboard, looking like he was in charge, directing a bunch of workers just a few feet away from my patio door. That snapped me out of it. Confusion turned into pure, boiling anger. I marched right over there. "Excuse me," I yelled, my voice shaking a little but loud enough to be heard over the noise. "What is going on here? This is my property." The foreman turned, looking annoyed, like I was interrupting him. "This here's part of the community clubhouse expansion project," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "We're putting in more parking spaces and a utility shed." My jaw practically hit the patio. "In my backyard? Are you serious? I'm not even a member of the HOA. This is private property." My parents had made a point of not joining when the HOA first formed years ago. They valued their independence, and frankly, so did I. The foreman just flipped through the papers on his clipboard, completely unfazed. "According to these plans, this section here falls under the HOA's jurisdiction. Got questions? You gotta talk to Mrs. Vance, the HOA president." Mrs. Eleanor Vance. Oh, I knew of her. Everyone in the neighborhood did. She was the queen bee, the enforcer, the one who seemed to enjoy making people miserable over the color of their mailbox or the height of their grass. The idea that she was behind this, it made a sick kind of sense. "I don't give a damn what your plans say," I snapped, my voice getting louder. "You are trespassing on my private property. You need to stop this construction right now." He gave me this dismissive little shrug. "Sorry, ma'am. I just follow orders. Take it up with the HOA." And he turned his back on me, starting to bark orders at the workers again. I just stood there, fist clenched, shaking with rage. Brushed off. Like my property rights, my home, meant absolutely nothing. Furious doesn't even begin to cover it. I stormed back inside, grabbed my phone, and looked up the HOA's contact number. Straight to voicemail. Of course. Okay, fine. If they wouldn't take my call, I'd go see the queen herself. The community clubhouse was right across the street. It was a pretty standard building, used for meetings and maybe the occasional potluck. As I walked over, my anger still simmering, I saw her, Mrs. Vance, standing outside, clipboard firmly in hand. Did she ever put that thing down? Chatting with two other board members, probably plotting their next neighborhood infraction. She was exactly as people described, perfectly dressed, radiating this air of absolute control, maybe in her 60s but sharp as a tack. "Mrs. Vance," I called out, walking straight towards her. She turned, her polite, practiced smile faltering just a bit when she saw the look on my face. "Miss Davis," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "What can I do for you?" "You can start by explaining why there's a construction crew destroying my backyard," I said, trying hard to keep my voice level but probably failing. "Your foreman says it's part of the HOA expansion, but I'm not in the HOA. What is going on?" Mrs. Vance arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, that tight smile never leaving her face. "Ah, yes, the clubhouse expansion. A necessary improvement for the community. We secured an easement for that portion of your property to accommodate the project. It's all perfectly legal, dear." "Legal?" My voice trembled with disbelief. "I never agreed to any easement. No one notified me. You can't just take my property." "An easement?" That sounded like legal jargon for theft. She sighed, like I was a particularly annoying child. "Notices were sent out months ago, Miss Davis. Perhaps you missed them?" The board voted unanimously to proceed. "Everything is in order." "That's impossible," I shot back. "I never got any notices. And I'll say it again, I'm not even a member. Show me this supposed easement. Show me the proof." She gave me that patronizing smile again, the one that made my skin crawl. "Oh, I don't carry legal documents around with me. But you're certainly welcome to file a formal complaint with the HOA office if you believe there's been an error. In the meantime," her voice hardened slightly, "the project will continue as planned." My hands clenched into fists. I could feel my face flushing. "This isn't over," I said through gritted teeth. "You're trespassing, and I'll prove it." Mrs. Vance just shrugged, completely nonchalant. "Do what you feel is necessary, Miss Davis. Have a lovely day." I spun around and walked away, my heart pounding with a toxic mix of frustration, anger, and helplessness. The sheer audacity, the arrogance. They just didn't care. Back in my house, the noise from the construction still grating on my nerves, I sank onto the couch. I pulled out my laptop and started digging. Property laws, HOA regulations, anything I could find. I searched through every file my parents had left, every email I'd received since inheriting the place. Nothing. Not a single word about an easement. Not a peep about this construction project. By the end of the evening, I knew two things for sure. 1. The HOA had massively overstepped. 2. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. My resolve hardened. First thing tomorrow, I was calling a lawyer. This was my home, Noah's home, the place my parents loved. And I would fight tooth and nail to protect it. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house, every distant rumble from outside, made me jump. All I could see was that torn-up fence, the concrete slabs on my lawn, Mrs. Vance's smug face. By the time the sun came up, I was already at my desk, fueled by coffee and sheer indignation, scrolling through my notes from the night before. My resolve hadn't wavered. If anything, it felt stronger, sharper. After dropping Noah off at school, trying my best to act normal for him, even though my stomach was in knots, I made the call. I found a lawyer online, Jessica Miller, who specialized in exactly this kind of mess. Property disputes, HOA battles. Her reviews were glowing, talking about how she fought hard for her clients. I needed someone like that. When I explained the situation to Jessica over the phone, her voice was calm but firm. "Wow, Olivia, that's bold, even for an aggressive HOA. Claiming an easement they never got, on property outside their jurisdiction? That's textbook encroachment." She listened patiently as I poured out the whole story, the frustration, the anger, the feeling of being utterly powerless against this bureaucratic machine. "Okay," she said finally. "This is definitely something we can fight. Based on what you've told me, they likely have no legal authority over your property. Claiming an easement without your consent, especially when your parents explicitly weren't members. That's not just unethical, it's almost certainly illegal." Hearing her say that, confirming my gut feeling, was a huge relief. Jessica scheduled an appointment for me to come into her office that afternoon. I spent the morning gathering everything. My parents' original deed, the one clearly stating the property was exempt from the HOA, photos of my yard before the construction nightmare started, pictures of the damage now, a map showing my property boundaries, anything and everything that might help. Walking into Jessica's office felt like taking the first real step towards fighting back. She greeted me warmly, and we dove right into the details. She carefully examined the deed, the photos, my notes. She nodded as she read, her expression serious. "This is all very clear," Jessica said, leaning back in her chair. "Your property is private. The HOA has absolutely no legal claim here. What they've done isn't just a violation of your rights, it's likely a breach of local zoning regulations too. They basically started a construction project on land they don't own or control. So, what's the first step?" I asked, feeling a surge of hope. "We send them a formal cease and desist letter," Jessica explained. "It puts them on notice, officially. We demand they immediately stop all construction on your property, remove their equipment and materials, and restore your yard to its original condition. We also warn them that if they don't comply, we will file for an injunction and sue for damages." "Do you think they'll actually stop just because of a letter?" I asked, skeptical after my run-in with Mrs. Vance. Jessica gave me a knowing smile. "Sometimes. HOAs like this often bully people who they think won't fight back. The threat of legal action from a lawyer can make them pause. They rely on intimidation. Once they see you have representation and you're serious, they might reconsider." But she added, her smile fading slightly, "Knowing Mrs. Vance's reputation, they might dig in their heels. If they do, we're ready for the next step, filing for that injunction." That afternoon, Jessica drafted the letter. It was strong, direct, citing specific property laws and demanding immediate action. She made sure to highlight the lack of any valid easement and the fact that my property was outside their jurisdiction. I decided to deliver it myself. I wanted to see the look on Mrs. Vance's face. I walked back over to the HOA office, letter in hand, and gave it directly to her. Her reaction was exactly what I expected. Ice cold. "This is completely unnecessary, Miss Davis," she said, barely glancing at the letter. "The HOA is acting in the best interest of the community. You should consider how your resistance impacts your neighbors." My eyes narrowed. I wasn't falling for that guilt trip. "What affects my neighbors because of your illegal construction is your problem, Mrs. Vance. What happens on my property is mine, and I'm not letting you bulldoze my rights." She set the letter down, her gaze sharp. "Very well. We'll see how this plays out." For the next week, my backyard was a tense, silent battleground. The construction crews stopped working, probably on Vance's orders after getting the lawyer letter, but they didn't clean up. The stakes, the concrete slabs, the piles of gravel, it all just sat there, a constant, ugly reminder of the HOA's invasion. I kept documenting everything, took pictures every day, logged the times the workers were still hanging around, sometimes just leaning against their trucks near my property line, watching. It felt like they were trying to intimidate me, wear me down. My frustration grew when I noticed one of the HOA board members, a guy named David Chin, seemed to be making daily inspections of the stalled construction site near my yard. He'd walk around, jotting things in a notebook, making calls on his cell. It felt creepy, like they were still plotting something. Feeling isolated and stressed, I started talking to more of my neighbors, hoping someone else had dealt with the HOA and might have advice, or at least offer some moral support. Most were sympathetic, but scared to get involved publicly. "They've been pushing the limits for years," one neighbor told me anonymously over the phone. "But nobody wants to be their next target. They always find a way to make your life miserable if you cross them." But then, a breakthrough. An elderly woman down the street, Mrs. Carol Peterson, had lived in the neighborhood forever. She remembered my parents clearly and remembered the early days of the HOA. "Oh, your parents fought tooth and nail to keep their property out of that association," Mrs. Peterson told me, her eyes twinkling with memory. "They valued their privacy. I always admired them for standing their ground. You know, I might have some old documents from back then in my files, things about the original neighborhood plans." Her records were a goldmine. Tucked away in an old box, she found a copy of the original zoning map from when the neighborhood was first developed. And clear as day, it showed my parents' lot as a standalone property, explicitly not part of the land governed by the HOA's boundaries. I shared this map with Jessica immediately. "This is fantastic, Olivia," she said. "This map, combined with the deed, strengthens our case significantly. It proves their expanded jurisdiction claim is baseless." Just as we were feeling more confident, the HOA retaliated. I received another formal letter, this time accusing me of obstructing community development and threatening fines for violating their construction compliance policy. It was absurd, full of vague legal threats. Jessica just laughed when I read it to her. "They're grasping at straws now. They have zero legal basis to fine you for anything on property they don't control. Ignore it. but keep it for our file. It just shows their pattern of harassment. Feeling bolder with the new evidence and Jessica's reassurance, I decided to take the fight public. I went to the next HOA board meeting. The community clubhouse was packed. Word had definitely gotten out. People were curious, whispering amongst themselves. When it was my turn to speak during the public comment period, I stood up, my hand shaking slightly but my voice strong. I laid out the facts. My property was private, the construction was illegal, their actions were an abuse of power. This is my home, I said, looking directly at the board members, my gaze lingering on Mrs. Vance. It's where I'm raising my son. I will not allow you to take it from me or destroy it. Your actions are unlawful and morally wrong. I demand you restore my property immediately. Mrs. Vance looked furious, her knuckles white where she gripped her pen. Miss Davis, she began, her voice tight. We've already explained that this project is for the greater good. Enough. I interrupted, holding up the copy of my property deed. This proves you have no authority over my property. Then I held up the old zoning map Mrs. Peterson had found. And this shows your claims are false. If you don't stop this project and fix the damage you've caused, I will see you in court. The room buzzed. People were murmuring, exchanging glances. I saw a few nods of agreement. For the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, the tide was starting to turn. Mrs. Vance glared at me, but the board quickly moved on to the next topic. They didn't address my demands directly, but I knew I had made my point. Now, it was just a matter of waiting for the legal hammer to fall. The fight was far from over, but walking home that evening, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The law was on my side, and maybe, just maybe, some of my neighbors were too. This was my home, and I wasn't giving up. The court hearing felt like it took forever to arrive, but finally, the day came. Weeks had flown by in a blur of legal prep, stress, and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy for Noah. Jessica had filed for the injunction to stop the construction permanently and force the HOA to fix my yard. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, but honestly, I felt a weird sense of calm too. Finally, we were going to get a resolution. Walking into the courthouse, I saw Mrs. Vance and a couple of other board members huddled with their lawyer. Mrs. Vance shot me a look that could curdle milk, but I just met her gaze and kept walking. Jessica gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. You've got this, Olivia. We have the facts, the law, everything. Just stay calm and tell the truth. The hearing started, and Jessica was brilliant. She laid out our case piece by piece. The original deed proving my property was exempt. The old zoning map Mrs. Peterson found. Photos of the destruction in my yard. She explained clearly how the HOA had zero legal right to be there, let alone tear things up. The HOA acted without permits, without legal authority, and without the homeowner's consent, Jessica stated, her voice ringing through the courtroom. Their claim of an easement is entirely fabricated. Their actions constitute illegal trespassing, property damage, and harassment. They have caused significant financial and emotional distress to my client. The HOA's lawyer tried his best to argue their side. He claimed they acted in good faith, believing they had the right to use that part of the land based on their expanded jurisdiction vote, the one they never properly notified anyone outside the HOA about. He talked about the project benefiting the community, but the judge wasn't buying it. He kept interrupting, asking for specific proof of the easement, proof of notification, proof of any legal standing. The lawyer kept falling back on vague references to bylaws that didn't apply to my property. When Mrs. Vance took the stand, her usual icy composure started to crack under Jessica's cross-examination. Jessica grilled her about the notification process, the opt-out history of the property, the decision to proceed without confirming their legal right to my land. At one point, Mrs. Vance actually admitted they assumed my property fell under their new rules because of the expansion vote and didn't specifically check the original deed or opt-out status before starting construction. She also claimed they'd sent a general announcement about the project to all HOA members, assuming that somehow covered non-members whose property they were encroaching upon. The judge looked absolutely livid. Let me be clear, Mrs. Vance, he said sternly. You cannot simply assume jurisdiction over private property. You cannot enforce HOA rules or claim easements on land that is explicitly outside your association's boundaries based on a vote your non-member neighbors weren't even part of. This level of carelessness, or perhaps willful ignorance, is unacceptable. After hours that felt like days, the judge delivered his ruling. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. He found entirely in my favor. The HOA had acted unlawfully. Period. He issued the injunction, ordering them to immediately stop all construction activity related to my property. But he didn't stop there. He ordered the HOA to remove everything, the concrete slabs, the stakes, the gravel, all of it, from my yard within 30 days. And they had to restore my backyard to its original condition at their expense. That meant new grass, repairing the fence, everything. On top of that, the judge awarded me damages, $20,000 to cover the emotional distress, the time I'd lost from work dealing with this mess, and Jessica's legal fees. I felt tears welling up, but these were tears of pure relief. I gripped Jessica's hand under the table. We did it. The arrogance, the bullying, the complete disregard for my rights, it had all backfired on them. The weeks after the ruling were almost surreal. A different kind of construction crew showed up, one hired by the HOA, under court order, to undo the damage. They hauled away the concrete, pulled out the stakes, and landscapers came in to resod the lawn and fix the fence. Watching my backyard slowly transform back into the peaceful space it was supposed to be felt incredible. Noah was overjoyed when his swing set was put back up, and I promised him no one would ever mess with his playground again. News of the victory spread like wildfire through Pinewood Estates. Neighbors I barely knew stopped me on the street to congratulate me. Many shared their own quiet horror stories about the HOA, saying they'd been too afraid to speak up before but that my fight had inspired them. It seemed I wasn't the only one who'd felt bullied. The fallout for the HOA was significant. Mrs. Vance and 2 other board members resigned almost immediately, their reputations completely shredded. The remaining board was under immense pressure from residents to overhaul their policies, be more transparent, and generally stop acting like neighborhood tyrants. One afternoon, Mrs. Peterson, my elderly neighbor, came over with a tray of cookies. "You've done more than just win your case, dear," she said, her eyes shining. "You've given this whole neighborhood hope. It's about time someone stood up to them bullies." Her words really hit home. This fight had been exhausting, mentally and emotionally draining. But it was worth it. Not just for me and Noah, but for the community. Months later, the flowers were blooming again, the grass was green, and Noah was laughing in the backyard. The construction mess felt like a distant bad dream. The whole ordeal taught me a lot about resilience, about not being afraid to stand up for what's right, even when it feels like you read David versus Goliath. My story became a local cautionary tale. Other HOAs in the area probably took note. For my neighbors, it was proof that you can fight back, that you don't have to just accept unfair treatment. As I watched Noah swinging higher and higher, his laughter echoing in the evening air, I felt this deep sense of gratitude. My home was safe. It was more than just a house. It was a symbol of the fight we won, the love of my family, and the peace we'd reclaimed. And no HOA, no matter how powerful they thought they were, could ever take that away.